$3.50.
$3.50.
Today, I visited a restaurant in Richmond called Silkway Halal. I have been meaning to check this place out for a while now because it is owned by a fellow 5'10 regular, George. I guess I figured I don't lose enough money to him at the tables, so I'm going to give him even more money by eating at his restaurant. His specialty is flopping full houses against me. George is a super competent cash and tournament player. I find him quite an intriguing character, being fluent in multiple languages and owning this unique restaurant. He is kind of a local legend as well for holding the record at Grand Villa Poker Room for biggest up and down swing and biggest cash out. This is a photo of his monstrous chip stack at around 24K, and he was actually still a little bit down at this point. So this same session, he was in for over $25,000 at one point and battled to get back up through a 30+ hour session. Yes, I do have his permission to share a story, and that's some local community poker lore for you guys. Anyways, the restaurant had a very antique and elegant vibe, down to the clay teapots, wooden furniture, and traditional Chinese art decor. The food was pretty amazing. I tried the lamb soup, which had very tender lamb. The noodles were nice and chewy. I have never had lamb dumplings before, so I decided to give that a shot. And it was so juicy and flavorful, I ended up getting another order of dumplings. Nicely done, George. I guess I'll be giving you more money on and off the tables. And to end this segment, I thought it would be appropriate to share with you guys a hand that I was in against George. Although I'm sure I frequently get into interesting spots with him, this is the last one I vaguely remember for now, as he ended up poking fun at me for the rest of the night, telling me how bad I played and what a fish I am. It is later in the night, and we are playing three-handed at a 5-10 table. At this point, we decided to make the straddle mandatory, so it is essentially a 5-10-20 game. I'm on the button and straddle with deuce 7 of spades. The small blind folds, and George in the big blind calls. I check. It's heads up into a flop of ace 7-3 with 2 spades. George bets $30. Easy call for me with a pair and flush draw. The turn is another ace. George continues to fire, this time for $125. At this point, I'm just thinking there's a high likelihood my 2-pair is still good here, especially in a three-handed configuration with no pre-flop raise. While three-handed, it was actually quite rare for us to see a flop unraised. My thought is that there's no way he wouldn't raise pre-flop if he did have an ace, and I was quite certain George was thinking the same about me. I call. The river is a brick. In comes George's third barrel at $400. I tank for a bit. This sizing is basically polarized to ace or nothing. The problem with my hand is that it blocks George's most natural bluff, which is the flush draw. But I know George is a thinking player, and if he did unblock spades, he would know to bluff this hand against me as well. After thinking for a while, I say out loud, "George, there's no way you didn't raise pre-flop with an ace," and I called. He mucked his hand, and I tabled mine to take down the pot. You've taken plenty of chips from me, George. You can let me have this one. It was Wednesday afternoon, and I decided to film a session of 2-5 at Grand Villa to share with you guys. However, I quickly realized that my camera phone was extremely low in power. So I am at the Grand Villa poker room right now, or actually I'm outside, or I'm directly above the poker room right now, right outside the Atlas Steakhouse. My name is on the list waiting to start a 2-5 game. This phone that I'm using to record and what I usually use to record all my sessions is at 2% battery life right now, so it's gonna die off anytime. And today is a day that I decided to play and vlog, so I will still be documenting my hands somehow. I want to share the session with you guys, so I'm still set on accomplishing that. But yeah, just know that you might not get a lot of on the table footage just because I forgot to charge my phone, and sorry about that. But yeah, I will see you guys at the hand analysis. I was pretty frustrated at myself because this session ended up being a pretty good one, and I wasn't able to film any of it. I only ended up taking a couple photos before my phone died, so I'm only going to share from this session the two bigger pots I was in. This hand, I pick up ace-6 of diamonds at the cutoff. Under the gun straddles to $10. The hijack calls. I raise it to $50. Under the gun calls and the hijack folds. It's heads up into a flop of 10-6 ace with 2 hearts. The villain checks. Amazing flop for me. I c-bet for $75, looking for value from flush draws and any ace. The villain calls. The turn is an offsuit 5. The villain checks again. Still most likely in the lead here, I continue firing for value. This time I size up close to pot size and bet $250. The villain check raises me to $550, committing more than half of his remaining stack. I think for a while. Pocket aces and 6s are heavily blocked, pocket 10s is possible, but I think should be a 3-bet pre-flop against me. This session I have been pretty aggressive pre-flop. My late position open can be read as not necessarily that strong. I do unblock hearts and I'm beating all combos of ace-x of hearts. I decide to just jam all in. The villain snap calls, which honestly kind of got me worried. The board runs clean, we table our hands, and I take this one down beating ace-king. This is a photo of the runout. This hand, I pick up ace-king at the low jack position. I open to $15. The hijack folds. The cutoff re-raises to $50. The button folds. The small blind calls. The big blind folds and the action is back on me. Since I closed the action, I think calling is okay here, but with the small blind cold calling, I think this is a good spot to 4-bet squeeze. If there are no 5 bets, the villain's ranges will be capped. I raise it to $200. The cutoff thinks for a while and calls. The small blind also calls. It's 3-way into a flop of 9-5-4 rainbow. The small blind checks, and I also check. The cutoff bets $300. The small blind folds, and the action is back on me. With the pre-flop action, the cutoff cold calling a 4-bet basically caps his range to never have aces or kings here, and most likely has pocket 10s, jacks, or queens at the strongest. I don't think he is ever 3-betting pre-flop with pocket 5s or 4s. If he happens to go in this line with pocket 9s, then props to him. I block aces and kings and could credibly rep both of those hands with my line, so I decide to go for it. I check raise him all in. The villain tanks for a while and folds. After around 5 hours of play, this is a shot of my chip stack. I bought in for $1,500 and cashed out for $3,028. That is a profit of $1,528. A few days later, while I'm editing this video, I decide I need another session with more actual footage to complete this episode. Alright, so today I have made sure that my phone is fully charged and I'm just getting ready to hop into another session, and this time to get some material so I can properly share with you guys, and I will see you guys at the tables. I head over to Grand Villa again, and they are getting pretty festive already with some nice Chinese New Year decor. I open a 2-5 table, and as I grab chips and sit down, I see that the table is pretty horrible. Everyone is a recognizable solid reg with no soft or weak players. The table talk was discussions of which tournament series everyone is thinking of playing this year. Right away, I know I'm in for a tough game, and as the game starts, we all decide on a mandatory under-the-gun straddle, so we are now playing 2-5-10. The very first hand, I pick up ace-5 of clubs in the straddle. There are 2 limpers, and the cutoff raises to $50. The button and the blinds fold. I decide to let everyone know with this first hand that I'm not messing around. With this solver-approved best hand to 3-bet against the late position open, I re-raise to $200. Everyone folds, and I take down the first pot. This hand, I pick up pocket 7s at the cutoff. Everyone folds to me, and I open to $30. Everyone folds except the straddle. It's heads up into a flop of King 10-5 rainbow. The villain checks and I c-bet for $25, and that's good enough to take it down. This hand, I am in the middle position with ace-king. I open to $30, only the button and the big blind calls. The flop comes King 7-7 rainbow. The big blind checks to me. Awesome board that's as dry as it can be. I have top pair, top kicker, and only a 7 beats me. I don't think it's too likely anyone here would have one, but I do think a c-bet will just likely take it down here. I don't have much to protect against, so if I check, I might get 2 streets of value from a pocket pair or 1 street from someone picking up a draw on the turn. Overall, really good spot to protect my checking range. I check. The button also checks. The turn comes the jack of hearts. The big blind checks again. I start betting for value now, targeting a jack or someone picking up a flush draw. I bet $50, and everyone folds. This hand, I pick up Queen 10 at the cutoff. Everyone folds to me and I open to $30. Only the big blind calls. It's heads up into a flop of Ace King 9 with 2 diamonds. The villain checks. Very good flop for my range. I also have a ton of stuff going on with my hand, with a gut shot straight draw, as well as a backdoor nut flush draw with the Queen of Diamonds. Great board to at least double barrel here. So I start with a c-bet, small, of $20. And I don't even get the chance to fire a second time as the villain just folds. This hand, I pick up King Jack of clubs in the straddle. Everyone folds to the big blind, who raises to $35. This is essentially a blind versus blind scenario, as this game is now a 2-5-10 game. With my hand, I think it's an easy 3-bet in position. I re-raise to $135. Taking it down now is nice, but I also don't mind a call as my hand is a very playable one post-flop in position. The villain, however, decides to 4-bet and makes it $285. This is where the mind games come in. The villain, along with just about everyone at the table, knows the position ranges very well, so he can simply be playing back at me, reading me as playing at him, trying to steal my blinds. I know this might seem a bit crazy, but neither of us are necessarily very strong here. I contemplate all options, including folding, calling, or a 5-bet jam. I settle with just a call, as I still have positional advantage and I'm going to use that by taking it to the streets. It's heads up into a flop of Queen 8-8 with 2 spades and 1 club. The villain c-bets for $125. I think for a bit. I definitely have the range advantage here. Typically speaking, the 4-better almost never has an 8. My hand blocks a ton of queen combos, and I also have backdoor flush and straight draws as well. I decide to start repping strength now. I take a look at my stack. The villain covers me. I decide to raise to a size that threatens an all-in on the turn. I don't necessarily plan on jamming on the turn, unless I pick up extra equity, but I want the villain to think that if he calls his bet, that's what's coming for sure. I make it $350. The villain tanks for quite a while, looking at my stack. And I know this is working so far because he knows or thinks that an all-in is coming. It's not just a raise to $350, it's potentially $1,300 he has to call off without an 8. After more tanking, He folds, and I get this one through. This hand, I pick up 3-8 of clubs on the button. Everyone folds to me and I open to $30. The big blind and the straddler calls. It's 3-way into a flop of Queen 8-5 with no clubs. Everyone checks to me. I hit second pair, which could be the best hand for now with good showdown value, but I unblock all the draws, so if I get check raised, it would be a horrendous spot. I check back for pot control. The turn is the 4 of clubs, essentially a brick. Everyone checks to me again. I think checking is okay here, continuing the line of trying to get the showdown as cheaply as possible. With the villains checking twice though, I could bet for protection, as well as get value from draws. If I do bet, I think it should be big if targeting draws and protection. I decide to bet $75. Only the big blind calls. The river is a deuce, and I still have second pair. The villain checks again. I think I've gotten all the value I can get with second pair and no kicker. I check back and table my hand. The villain mucks and I'm good. This hand, I pick up pocket kings at under the gun +1. But because of our straddle game, I am first to act. I am so excited to see this hand, my first actual premium starting hand of this session. I open to $30. I've been quite aggressive and active so far and haven't showed down any real strong hands. I'm hoping someone has picked up on that and decides to play back at me. I get 3 callers. I'm out of position and it's 4-way into a flop of Ace-10 for a rainbow. Now I'm just sighing in my head, looking at the ace high board. I check. Everyone also checks. Great, my kings might be in the lead here and everyone is just calling me light pre-flop. If I can get the showdown, I might be the winner. The turn comes, another 10, and I'm back to sighing in my head. I check. The hijack bets out $50. The cutoff and button folds. This is just a horrible spot out of position. My kings will essentially play out as a bluff catcher, and it's not a great one at that, blocking the flush draw and straight draw. With the villain betting out into 3 people, I just think he has to have an ace or 10x here. I just let this one go. This hand, I pick up pocket 10s in the small blind. Under the gun +1 opens to $30. The cutoff re-raises to $100. The button folds and the action is on me. I think for a bit and decide to cold call, essentially set mining out of position. This is a horrible play and I very much regret doing this right away, as you'll see. The big blind and under the gun folds. The action is back on the initial raiser, and of course he 4-bet squeezes to $400. The cutoff folds and the action is on me. I am hating myself for getting myself into this spot. My hand should be 4-bet or fold, leaning towards folding mostly, but now I have to make a decision of folding or jamming. Playing 10s out of position in a 4-bet pot is just not something I'm going to do at this table. 5-bet jamming with 10s and getting called is also really bad. This should be an easy decision, but I end up tanking for a long time anyways. In the end, I just fold, something I should have done at the beginning. This hand, I pick up ace-king on the button. Everyone folds to the cutoff, who opens to $35. I 3-bet to $125. The small blind and big blind folds. Under the gun calls, and the initial raiser calls. It's 3-way to a flop of Ace-7-3 with 2 clubs. Under the gun leads out for $150. The cutoff folds. Pretty odd for the villain to lead out here. With top pair, top kicker, I'm definitely not going anywhere, so easy call for me. The turn is the jack of clubs. The villain now checks. The turn completes a flush, and I already have and block top pairs, so I don't think betting on this street accomplishes much, as I'll likely fold out weaker hands and only get stronger hands to call. I check back for pot control. The river is another jack. The villain checks again. His line now seems like an ace, and my hand beats all aces. I decide now to bet for value, as I could get called by an ace that reads me as simply trying to steal the pot in position. I go for a size of $300. Before I even put the chips in, the villain folds. This hand, I pick up King Jack of Diamonds in the big blind. Everyone folds to the small blind, who calls. This is now battle of the 3 blinds. I decide to raise it up to $50. My first aim is to get the straddler to fold here, so even if we go to a flop, I will still be playing in position. Of course, the straddler calls, and the small blind also calls. It's 3-way to a flop of Queen King 10 with 2 clubs and 1 diamond. The small blind checks. Great flop for me as I hit top pair with an open-ended straight draw. In this spot though, I decide to exercise some pot control. I have the board covered and there's not much more for me to protect against. I do miss 1 street of value from a flush draw, but I also do have to protect my checking range sometimes. I check. Under the gun also checks. The turn is the 5 of diamonds, and now I also pick up a flush draw. The small blind leads out for $110. Easy call for me as my hand gets better. Under the gun folds. The river is a brick. The villain now checks. This line seems like Queen Jack or 10 Jack. I decide to go for a value bet targeting those hands. I might get looked up with a hand as light as 10-9, as there are 2 missed flush draws out there. I bet $175, and the villain folds. This hand, I pick up pocket aces in the small blind. Everyone folds to the hijack, who opens to $30. The cutoff and button folds. I 3-bet to $150. Everyone folds except the initial raiser. It's heads up into a flop of King Jack 8 with 2 clubs. I check. The villain checks back. The turn is ace of diamonds. I have now turned top set. Doesn't look like the villain has much though, and seems to have given up. Betting now will likely end the hand here. I decide to go for a check and then a small bet on the river to maybe extract something. I check. The villain checks back. The river is a brick. I bet out $100, and the villain folds. For the last interesting hand of this session, I pick up ace deuce of spades at the cutoff. Everyone folds to me and I open to $30. The button and small blind folds. The big blind 3-bets to $85. Under the gun folds and the action is back on me. I think the small blind can be 3-betting light against my late position open. A 4-bet is okay here, but I decide that my hand is not too bad to play in position. I call. It's heads up into a flop of deuce 9-10 rainbow. The villain c-bets for $80. I hit a pair here. Even though it's bottom pair, I'm not going anywhere yet for 1 bet. This board actually favors my range more so than the villain's. I call. The turn is a king. The villain continues to lead out, this time for $200. He's not slowing down. I don't have a good bluffing hand at this point, and it doesn't seem like the villain is going to let this one go. So I just fold. Here are the results for this session. I bought in for $1,700 and I cashed out for $2,235. That is a profit of $535. If you guys watch and enjoy my videos, please remember to subscribe. It really helps out a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys look forward to the next.